You already know that your harshest critic lives inside your own head. But how do you transform that critic into a compassionate guide for navigating life? This blink teaches you how to tackle the destructive pattern of linking your value to achievements, possessions, or other people's opinions. Drawing from candid experiences, including financial collapse, personal loss, and the chaos of early parenthood, it demonstrates how changing your inner dialogue matters more than changing your circumstances. Through relatable stories and actionable insights, you'll learn to silence the negative voice that insists you're not good enough. You'll gain practical strategies for building self-compassion that translates into better decisions, stronger connections, and actual fulfillment, rather than just the appearance of it. When you cultivate genuine kindness toward yourself, you'll finally live the life you deserve. We spend enormous energy trying to control our external world, checking notifications, tackling endless tasks, staying perpetually busy. But deep down, many of us suspect the futility of this rat race. Deep down, we know that true happiness comes from within. Yet most of us fill our days with distractions, telling ourselves we're too swamped to focus on what actually matters. Why is that? The uncomfortable truth is that we often choose these distractions because examining what we truly value can feel scary or vulnerable. The author, Robbins, discovered this when his mother received a terminal cancer diagnosis. During her final weeks, something remarkable happened. She became more authentic, released lifelong grudges, and expressed appreciation freely. Through losing her, he realized that we don't need to wait for tragedy to live this way. We can deliberately ask ourselves each day, does this truly matter? This principle extends beyond obviously dramatic moments. Robbins spent years receiving rejection after rejection from publishers, 25 in total. Same book proposal, same effort, same disappointment. Then something shifted internally. He stopped waiting for external permission and declared himself ready to proceed regardless of others' approval. Within days, 3 publishers expressed interest in the identical proposal they'd ignored before. Nothing external had changed. The shift was internal. We see this pattern constantly. On difficult days, even beloved activities feel draining. On great days, typical annoyances barely register. Our internal state shapes our external experience far more than we acknowledge. The invitation is simple but challenging. Stop exhausting yourself trying to change everyone around you. Focus instead on your own evolution. That's where genuine transformation begins. Most of us have our self-worth completely backward. We believe we need to achieve something, look a certain way, or gain others' approval before we can feel valuable. This creates an exhausting cycle where we're constantly trying to prove ourselves worthy. Consider how a newborn baby receives love. They haven't accomplished anything. They can't even control their own bodily functions. Yet people shower them with genuine admiration and appreciation simply because they exist. Their worth is inherent, not earned. Somewhere along the way to adulthood, we forget this fundamental truth about ourselves. Children naturally embody self-love. A toddler will twirl around naked, delighted by their own existence, completely unbothered by perceived flaws. As we grow up, though, we absorb cultural messages telling us we're inadequate. We learn to criticize ourselves relentlessly and treat our bodies like enemies rather than allies. Reclaiming our natural self-acceptance starts with recognizing that your value isn't tied to your career, achievements, or productivity. You are so much more than what you do. When people remember loved ones who've passed, they rarely mention job titles or accomplishments. They celebrate who that person was and how they made others feel. So practice removing conditions from your self-love. Instead of only feeling good about yourself when you succeed or look a certain way, try celebrating all of who you are, including your shadows and imperfections. This doesn't mean giving up on growth. Genuine transformation only happens from a foundation of self-acceptance, not self-criticism. Regularly remind yourself that you're valuable simply because you exist, not because of what you've done or what others think, just because you're you. A beautiful paradox emerges when you stop demanding perfection from yourself and embrace who you actually are right now. You create space for authentic change. Despite what you might fear, self-acceptance isn't the end of growth, but rather its beginning. When you let your own light shine without apology, the harsh inner critic that's been running your life can finally step aside, making room for genuine compassion and sustainable transformation. Our inner critics are incredibly hard on us. They criticize our mistakes, judge our emotions, and constantly operate from a place of should rather than authentic desire. Yet, as we just learned, real growth comes from radical self-compassion, not harsh self-discipline. Consider how you talk to yourself when you mess up. Chances are you use words you'd never direct at a friend. The author learned this lesson dramatically when he forgot his passport before an international flight. His inner critic unleashed such brutal self-punishment that he made himself physically ill. Meanwhile, his wife responded with pure kindness and understanding. The contrast was striking. His own cruelty hurt him more than the actual mistake. When you see a fault in yourself that you want to correct, follow this sequence. Recognize the pattern, acknowledge its impact without judgment, forgive yourself authentically, then allow change to unfold naturally. Most people skip that crucial forgiveness step. They recognize their flaws, acknowledge them, then punish themselves repeatedly, which keeps them stuck in the same cycle forever. Holding on to resentment toward yourself blocks any forward movement. Another powerful shift is to stop shoulding yourself. That voice telling you what you should do with your life reveals a lack of self-trust. Ask different questions instead. What's genuinely true for me? What do I actually want? This moves you from obligation to authentic choice, from fear-based motivation to desire-based action. Self-care works the same way. Your heart pumps blood to itself first, then to the rest of your body. That's how survival works. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. Prioritizing your own well-being makes you more available and generous with others, not less. So give yourself permission to make mistakes, feel your emotions fully, and move only as fast as your most hesitant parts feel safe to. When you replace harsh judgment with gentle compassion, you unlock the capacity for genuine transformation. You're constantly measuring yourself against others, terrified of looking foolish, and convinced that if you just worked harder or achieved more, you'd finally feel good enough. But the real problem isn't your circumstances, it's your relationship with your own ego. When the author Robbins' baseball career collapsed, his ego was crushed. Years of training gone. Major league dreams finished. But during a drive with his young daughter years later, she innocently asked why he couldn't play baseball anymore. As he explained that his injury led him away from the sport, but toward meeting her mother and becoming her father, he broke down crying. The devastating failure that wounded his ego had actually guided his soul toward what mattered most. Your ego sees setbacks as catastrophes, but your deeper self recognizes them as course corrections. When you stop protecting your image and start embracing your authentic experience, everything shifts. Once, after browsing a colleague's impressive website for just minutes, Robbins spiraled into comparison mode, cataloging all the ways this stranger seemed superior. Within moments, he felt deflated and inferior. Sound familiar? This comparison trap operates like a rigged game, where you're either puffed up with superiority or crushed by inadequacy. Neither state brings genuine peace. To counter this, start by noticing when you're measuring yourself against someone else. That awareness alone creates space to choose differently. Remember that your worth exists independent of your ranking in some imaginary hierarchy. Another way to let go of your ego is to practice getting real instead of being right. When you're willing to say, "I feel lost," or "I don't have this figured out," you give others permission to drop their defenses too. Vulnerability creates connection, while righteousness creates isolation. And try to allow things to be easy. Stop rehearsing defensive speeches about how hard you work. What you focus on tends to manifest. Expecting struggle usually produces it, while trusting in ease frees energy for what actually matters. The path forward isn't perfection, it's self-acceptance. Notice where you're demanding more from yourself. Ask whether you're protecting your ego or nurturing your growth, and give yourself permission to be imperfect and real. What most of us get wrong about courage is that we think it means not being afraid. But real courage is about acting even when your voice shakes, your hands tremble, and your heart pounds out of your chest. When the author Robbins met the woman who would become his wife, he was unemployed, feeling insecure, and terrified of rejection. So instead of asking her out, he offered to help with her homework. Safe, right? But when she called him about it, he faced a choice: hide behind the excuse or speak his truth. With his heart racing, he confessed he really just wanted to take her on a date. Her response? "Oh, good. I'd rather go on a date anyway." The very thing he feared became the gateway to what he truly wanted. Asking for what we want, whether it's help, a date, or honest conversation, requires vulnerability. And vulnerability, research shows, is actually our most accurate measure of courage. During an event for minor league baseball players, one coach started crying when he told his story of finally making it to the major leagues. In doing so, he broke every rule of the tough masculine culture that dominates the sport. Yet his story impacted many of the young players so deeply that they were gushing about it to Robbins after his own talk. The coach's message had reached them precisely because he dared to be human. You don't need perfect words or total confidence to take these steps. When Robbins' friend lost his father, Robbins avoided him, scared of saying the wrong thing. Finally, his friend confronted him. "You haven't asked how I'm doing." Robbins said he didn't know what to say. The friend's reply cut through everything. "Well, you could have just said that." You can start applying this advice today. Learn to distinguish between your opinions, which tend to judge, and your truth, which reveals how you actually feel. Instead of saying, "You were rude," try, "That hurt my feelings." Ask for one thing you want this week without obsessing over the outcome. Talk about one difficult thing you've been avoiding. Remember this simple wisdom: the answer is always no if you don't ask. But when you swing hard at life, even knowing you might miss, you give yourself a chance to actually connect with what matters. We spend remarkable amounts of energy fighting reality. When life throws unexpected curveballs, a forced move, a delayed project, someone else's behavior, we resist what's already happening. But the truth is, really, that surrender actually works. The author Robbins discovered this while juggling a house move during his planned writing retreat. When you stop arguing with circumstances and simply handle the next thing in front of you, the overwhelm dissolves. One box at a time, one task at a time. Fellow author and speaker Byron Katie puts it perfectly: when you argue with reality, you lose 100% of the time. This same principle applies to where we direct our attention. During a struggling baseball season at Stanford, Robbins' pitching coach had players list every frustration: injuries, bad weather, unfair calls, lack of support. Then came the question that changed everything: what on this list can you actually control? The answer was sobering: almost nothing. You can't control outcomes, other people's choices, or external circumstances. You control exactly 3 things: your attitude, your effort, and your perspective. When you pour energy into anything else, you're just spinning your wheels. Gratitude helps you avoid this wheel spinning. An Ethiopian cab driver once told Robbins that Americans act like spoiled brats, constantly focused on what's wrong. From his perspective, every day in America was a good day. Research stands behind the cabbie's approach. People who write down 5 things they're grateful for each week report better health, more exercise, and greater life satisfaction. Gratitude isn't a concept to understand, you have to actually practice it. When Robin's mother died, he realized that embracing mortality clarifies everything. At memorial services, we give ourselves permission to be real, vulnerable, and focused on what truly matters. We don't need to wait for tragedy to access that consciousness. Living like you're going to die means fully engaging with life right now, grateful for its temporary, precious gift. This blink to Nothing Changes Until You Do by Mike Robbins gave you permission to release your inner critic and embrace your authentic self. Real transformation starts within, not through controlling external circumstances. Your harsh self-criticism actually blocks the fulfillment you seek, and your worth is unconditional, not something you earn through achievements or others' approval. When you remember this and offer yourself the same compassion you'd offer a friend, space for real change opens up. Your ego's comparison games only breed insecurity, but vulnerability creates real courage and connection. And focus exclusively on what you control: attitude, effort, and perspective. Everything else drains energy without results. Gratitude shifts your entire experience. Practice it actively, not just intellectually. Stop arguing with reality and handle what's actually in front of you. And don't wait for tragedy to live authentically. When you finally extend kindness to yourself, you create space for the transformation you've been seeking all along. Okay, that's it for this Blink. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next Blink.